Watching New York Attorney General Letitia James and Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis go to war with former President Trump has been revealing. It appears that Black Americans, led by Black women, are the only ones courageous enough to hold the former president's feet to the fire for the alleged crimes he has committed. The infamous mugshot of inmate P01135809 would not be a reality without District Attorney Fani Willis's investigation into former President Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election and award the state of Georgia's electoral college votes to himself. Letitia James and Fani Willis's courageousness compelled me to think of Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, the two election workers targeted by former President Trump and Rudy Giuliani. Freeman and Moss stayed resilient through the harassment and boldly testified before the January 6th Select Committee. Freeman and Moss also thumped Rudy Giuliani in the head for more than $148 million in a defamation suit in December 2023. These women have shown tremendous strength and courage. They have inspired me and pushed me to think about the historical bravery of the Black American woman. Documented many times, the Black American woman has proven she will rise to the occasion no matter how much adversity she faces. She has always played a pivotal role in American history, yet her recorded fearlessness and strength are under-acknowledged and unrecognized by the patriarchal society. In this video, we will spotlight Sojourner Truth, a legendary Black American woman who rose from enslavement to become the symbol of a strong woman. Sojourner Truth, born Isabella, is one of two famous Black American women of the 19th century. The other, Harriet Tubman, known as the Moses of her people, also emerged from enslavement. Born in 1797, Truth was a generation older than Tubman, born in 1821. Truth was a woman of extraordinary intelligence despite her illiteracy. Sojourner Truth was almost 6 feet tall and had a low voice that some said was masculine. She was an abolitionist and feminist who exposed the fact that the enslaved were not just men, but women as well. No other woman who experienced the ordeal of enslavement managed to survive with the strength and confidence to become a public presence long term. She went on speaking for years and traveled America criticizing slavery, women's rights, and women's suffrage. She was a Pentecostal, and through her religious beliefs, she transformed herself from Isabella to Sojourner Truth. Isabella was born an enslaved person in Ulster County, New York. We often forget that enslaved people existed in northern states and the southern states originally. Slavery was a vital part of northern life before 1800. The distribution of enslaved people across New York was widespread. Rural Dutch families, on average, would own 1 or 2 enslaved people. The main concentration of blacks was in New York City. Isabella was one of the rural Black New Yorkers who spoke Dutch and learned to speak English fluently throughout her life. Her parents, James and Elizabeth, were the slaves of the Revolutionary War Colonel Johannes Hardenberg. Her father, James, was known as Bomfree, meaning tree, and her mother, Elizabeth, was known as Betsy. Isabella was the youngest of 10 or 12 children. One of her earliest memories as a child was of her parents grieving over the loss of her siblings who became sold away. Her early years became filled with survivor's guilt and chronic depression. Depression. The fear of the inevitable disaster of separation from family always lingered and eventually became a reality she would experience. James and Betsy were lent a cottage and allowed to grow and sell crops to pay for food and clothes. Unexpectedly, Colonel Hardenberg died, and James and Betsy lost the cottage and the land. They all were moved to Hardenberg's son's, Charles's house, where they slept in the chilly, dark basement. After the death of Charles Hardenberg, 9-year-old Isabel went to an English-speaking family named Neely. Her parents were too old to convey any price and lived in a hut owned by the Simmons family. Her mother died suddenly, and her father lived in poor health for several years. He eventually perished, quote, chilled and starved, end quote, after traveling back and forth between different Hardenberg family members. Isabella said that her parents died, quote, ignorant, helpless, crushed in spirit, and weighed down by the hardship of cruel bereavement, end quote. Before she could grow up, Isabella had lost both her parents and 10 siblings. At the Neely's house, Isabella was inadequately clothed and suffered from the harsh winters. The Neelys could not speak Dutch, and Isabella could not speak English. The language barrier made things worse, and when Isabella did not understand commands, John Neely beat her severely. After a year and a half, Isabella became the property of the Shriver family. At age 12 or 13, Shriver sold Isabella to John Dumont for 70 pounds. Isabella lived with the Dumonts for 16 years and had an ambivalent attachment to them since she had known them longer than her parents. To the Dumonts, she was a daughter, servant, field laborer, and later a nurse. Isabella had 5 children. Her first child, Diana, was with Robert, her only romantic relationship. Romance and love were experiences rarely felt by working people in those days. Robert's owner was a man named Catlin, and he did not want Robert to have children outside of his property. He forbade Robert to see Isabella, but he saw her anyway. When Catlin found out, he beat Robert nearly to death for disobeying his wishes. Robert submitted and married one of Catlin's females, but died shortly after due to injuries he received in the beating. Isabella married one of Dumont's slaves, Thomas, and had 4 children: Peter, Elizabeth, Thomas, and Sophia. Isabella wanted freedom for herself and her children, but the only free black people she knew were old and frail. She calculated the day of her freedom based on New York's Second Gradual Emancipation Act. The Second Gradual Emancipation Act, passed in 1817, stipulated that slavery would end within New York's borders on July 4th, 1827. Those born after 1799 still must serve a period of indentured servitude until age 28 if male and 25 if female. This law would keep her children in servitude well after 1827. Isabella struck a deal with Dumont to emancipate her a year before July 4th, 1827. Shortly after the agreement, Dumont reneged on his part after Isabella suffered a severe injury to her hand. Isabella had difficulty weighing Dumont's needs of finishing the 6-month task of spinning wool into yarn or leaving a year before emancipation as they once agreed. In 1826, Isabella began moving towards embracing Methodism, but blended animist West African and pagan European beliefs with it. She finished the work in the late fall of 1826 just as she heard the voice of God instructing her to set out on her own and be a free woman. She left the Dumonts, taking baby Sophia, and traveled to see her old friend, Levi Rowe. Rowe directed her to Isaac and Marie Van Wagenen, whom Isabella knew for years. Unlike the Dumonts, the Van Wagenens opposed slavery. When Dumont came for Isabella and Sophia, the Van Wagenens paid Dumont $25 for Isabella and $5 for Sophia. She lived with the Van Wagenens, taking on their name. She lived a quiet, peaceful life with whom she called, quote, excellent people for a year. In 1827, Isabella helped to found the Kingston Methodist Church. Isabella's heart lay in Pentecostal beliefs which emphasized the Holy Spirit. One day, Isabella inclined that Dumont would take her home and she would willingly return with him. Dumont arrived at the Van Wagenens in an open carriage, and just before Isabella climbed inside the vehicle, God revealed himself to her. God showed her that he was all over the entire universe, and there was no place that he was not. When Isabella regained consciousness, Dumont was gone. Isabella believed that she sinned for not believing in the almighty power of God, and she began to fear God's wrath. She later had a vision of Jesus, who assured her he loved her and would stand between herself and God's fury. Jesus' presence was liberating and put Isabella at ease. Isabella spoke on being baptized in the Holy Spirit and being born again with the assurance of salvation. The experience gave Isabella the strength to persevere under adversity and to overcome her feelings of worthlessness. She located a power that made it possible to survive. Her new ability to act with the support of an ever-present supernatural force gave her strength to overcome pain and fear. In the fall of 1826, John Dumont sold Isabella's son, Peter, to one of his in-laws, Dr. Gedney. Gedney sold Peter to his brother, Solomon Gedney, and Solomon sold him to his brother-in-law, an Alabama farmer named Fowler. Solomon Gedney was doing what most slave-holding New Yorkers did. He sold his slaves down south, where the market was lucrative. Isabella believed that God would help her rescue her son. She went to the Dumont, Gedney, and warring families for help, but found they had no sympathy. She then went to God and said, quote, "Oh God, make the people hear me. Don't let them turn me off without hearing and helping me," end quote. With the aid of the Holy Spirit, she acted and received advice and money for legal fees from the Ulster County Quakers. With the assistance of the Dutch lawyers John Rutzer and Brian Hasbrook, Isabella entered a complaint with the Ulster County Grand Jury. She gave an assertive deposition in court, and in 1828, she became the first black woman to have a legal victory against a white man. The judge declared that the, quote, boy be delivered into the hands of his mother, having no other master, no other controller, no other conductor, but his mother, end quote. When Peter returned home, his master brought him to see Isabella. When the child saw her, he shrieked. Peter experienced an immense amount of trauma since their separation. Isabella, clerks of the court, and several adults soothed Peter and assured him that Isabella was his mother. Isabella looked at her son closely and saw Peter's body covered in scars from head to toe. Isabella became infuriated, and in vengeance and witchcraft, she cursed the Fowler family. Shortly after, Isabella learned that Fowler had beaten Eliza Gedney Fowler to death. Isabella felt as if she received retributive justice by an act of God. Isabella was becoming torn between motherhood and ambition. She could stay in Ulster County with her daughters or go to the metropolis and seek well-paid work. Hey y'all, listen, High Velocity Philosophy is a brand new channel, and I'm just going to do whatever I want on here. And if you like this kind of content, I really appreciate it if you liked, shared, and subscribed to this channel, all right? Peace.